Okay, great. So thank you for attending our session, everybody. We will talk about one of the most important topic on everybody's mind right now when it comes to AI, be it localization industry or not localization industry, and that is governance of AI translation. Here, however, we'll drive it back home to localization and we'll talk about the localization leader's guide to governing AI translation. So my name is Olga Brigava and I run our AI efforts here at Smartling. And I'm joined by our esteemed colleague, Alex Yanishevsky, who is the senior director of all of our AI deployments and implementations. So once you are engaging with Smartling, you'll be dealing with Alex's team whenever it comes to AI. So let's have a look. So what does it look like right now? Let's look at all the components here. So first of all, the content, the volume of content grows exponentially. And everybody, I'm sure everybody's dealing with that right now. We're facing the demand for more languages, more content types, and all of that in instant delivery. Now, when it comes to quality accountability, because everybody has access to AI and because everybody can now plug in, or implement an AI-driven tool, quality is completely scattered across the organization. So it is all, and if you look at this ball of yarn, there are more questions than answers in terms of how to tackle it all. So for instance, we were in a conversation with an executive from a Fortune 500 company who said, okay, fantastic, we implemented a single solution. I'm not going to call it out, but that's something that operates off everybody's desktop. And what do you get next? Suddenly my company has 300,000 voices and I have absolutely no control over it. So what happens without governance? A lot of things happen without governance. First of all, you have no control of where your data is floating and what kind of channels your data is floating through. Second, you have no control over your brand tone and voice because you do not have any centralized assets. Then ungoverned LLMs, again, you don't necessarily know, again, what LLMs are doing, what kind of quality your LLMs are delivering, or any other AI solution that you have implemented. Now, again, back to the topic of centralization, can you enforce your terminology? Not really. Can you enforce your brand voice and style guide? Again, not really. Can you enforce and accumulate assets in your translation memory? Yet again, not really. And now let's look at but let's look at what actually happens. So what are the key distinctions between, let's go with the right and the wrong. So the key distinction is LLM can produce an output. And if, for instance, you're bilingual, it can look at a first glance for simple content, and we've seen it happen many times. If you're bilingual, it can produce reasonable translation. Say, yeah, okay, great. It's going to work across the board. But do you have any idea whether it will or will not? No, not necessarily. Now, in the government environment, not only does your model produce a translation, but you actually you also have control over the quality of your translation. So let's look at the building blocks of what governance actually means, even more so when it applies to our content. The three pillars of governance are control. And I'll pause here for a second. When we talk control, we are talking about end-to-end control throughout your process. So you control what goes in, you control what goes out, and you have full visibility. Now, transparency, that's the one that I just mentioned, full visibility. So what does transparency mean? That means that all the motions of your content throughout the platform are completely visible, traceable, auditable, and reversible. And then the light one will be accountability. Okay, you tracked it, you see that something went wrong. Obviously, when you control the process and you have full visibility into the process, you can be held accountable for the process because you can reverse the action and you can correct what went wrong. Okay, now here is the biggest challenge. we know that content, and even more so now, content flows from multiple sources. And here we go. Like, let's just look at multiple sources that are possible here. So, I mean, we can call out whatever. We can call Microsoft Suite, right? We can call out AEM. We can call out Figma. So what does it mean? The biggest challenge is you want to govern your data across the entire platform. And that equally means two things. And let's look at let's look at the solution, and then we'll get into what it really means in practical terms, what you actually want to govern. So when you have multiple inputs, there are two dimensions to it. And I'll leave it to you to guess what those dimensions are, right? You want to govern linguistic consistency, and you want to govern the engineering consistency. And I'll get to that in the next slide. So data governance across the entire plethora of your inputs can only mean one thing. You want to do it through a single platform that takes care of that governance for you. And now Alex and I will play a little game. I will be the strategist, and Alex will be the tactical response to strategic initiatives. Okay, so Alex, ready?
Ready.
Okay, awesome. Let's go. The what and the why. So strategy, I'm going to do it long term, and it's going to take me months to years. That's my vision as an executive. I have my strategic vision for where I'm going with my AI.
Right. And on the tactical side, I'm going to talk about the how and the when. So our horizon is short term, and we're looking how to accomplish this in days to weeks.
Okay, wonderful. Next one, scope. I run a huge organization. So my strategy is I want to implement it across the board. Okay, Alex, organization-wide direction. Make it tactical for me.
Right. So in contrast, on the tactical side, it's gonna be focused on the very narrow, focused on specific teams, and focused on task level actions.
Okay, good enough. Okay, now I really want to understand where I'm going with this. I want to design my AI program and governed AI program from ground up. So I want to define my goals, and I want to define my program vision. Where do I go from here?
And on the tactical side, what we're going to do is we're going to execute on very specific plans to get to that vision.
Okay, fantastic. Now, the last one, broad. So what mountain do we climb?
Right. And on the tactical side, what we're focused on is what route do we take to get to the mountain, right? So that's kind of the segue for what I'm going to talk about, right? On the executive side, on the strategic side, Olga would map the mountain, the summit, and on the tactical side, we're going to use various tools to get there. So let's start talking about these tools. So first, we're going to talk about establishing trust in large language models. And you'll see 4 building blocks. You'll see a pyramid with 4 building blocks that we're going to talk about. So our topics are essentially going to be reliable data and robust quality checks, because frankly, an AI is only as good as the examples that you give it, right? You give it bad information, it's not going to do as well. We're going to talk about detection and monitoring, because you need to catch problems before your customers do. On our side as well, we need to catch problems before they get to you and to your customers. Third, transparency and auditability. Olga already touched about on this, right? We want to make sure that our stakeholders and our legal teams, they need to see what happened and why it happened, so things can be remediated. And the last one is risk mitigation. Particularly in regulated industries, a single mistranslation, something that's incorrect, could cost you 6 figures or worse. So these things aren't aspirational. They're operational capabilities that a governed translation platform should have and should deliver on. So we're going to go through each one of them in turn. So first, the first building block, reliable data and robust quality checks. right? So what are we doing here? Most organizations have assets that have been built up over years, right? Translation memories, glossaries, style guides. But if those assets are not connected to your AI layers, they're just sitting there in a drawer and the LLM does its own thing, right? In a governed system, all of these become part and parcel of your workflow, right? The TMs, the glossaries, is data that's fed into the translation process. They help to constrain the model in a productive way that will give you the translation that matches your tone of voice and your brand, right? They enforce terminology. They carry forward essentially the investment that you've made in localization quality, right? Also, on top of that, we have quality checks that run before anything that ships, right? These are things that catch terminology gaps, errors, tag mismatches, structural issues, right? So the idea, the overarching idea here is you have years of localization investment in your assets. You don't want to throw them away. They need to become the foundation and the cornerstone for your AI consistency. So what you're seeing here is a tool that we have which actually allows you to query your assets and see how good these assets are, right? The uncomfortable truth is that it's not always the case that assets are ready for AI. And if your translation memory is full of inconsistencies or outdated segments or conflicting terms, this feeds into the LLM and can give you and can actually make things worse. And the problem is it can make things worse at scale. So essentially, think about it this way: bad assets lead to bad examples lead to bad translations, right? And when you're doing this across dozens of languages, this could climb into thousands of dollars of rework. So what we have the ability to do is actually look at your assets, evaluate them, correct them, streamline them, remediate them so they can be used efficiently in a RAG process. So now we go to the next building block, which is detection and monitoring, right? And the idea here is that large language models will give you an answer. They'll give you an answer no matter what. The crucial thing, though, is figuring out what's good and what's less than optimal, right? So even with clean data, as we spoke about a moment ago, even with quality checks, LLMs can still produce an output that doesn't match the source. And what's particularly tricky about it is they have this sense of false fluency. They very confidently tell you that something is correct, but it may not necessarily be correct, right? So one of the things that we have is hallucination detection that can surface this content and basically evaluate the source and target texts. So I like to use this pictorially because I think it captures LLMs very well. When it, on the left side, right, when it works well, when LLMs work well, when AI works well, it seems like magic, right? It seems you just see stuff, it works, and it's wonderful. But when it doesn't work well, I would liken it to basically taking a little kid, giving them a lot of sugar, and then letting them wave a wand around and see what happens. And that's when you get into things like hallucination detection, right? Those are the sort of things that we want to be able to find, because that's what builds trust. That's what allows us to figure out what's good and what's relevant. So just to show you an example here. So we have our English text and we have a hallucinated translation in the Spanish, right? This is something that is a false friend. It's a trap that large language models occasionally fall into, where they translate the word embarrassed as embarazada, right? And that's a problem. That's a flagrant mistranslation because it means pregnant. It doesn't mean embarrassed, right? And then we have the correct translation. So how do we actually catch this? We use this concept called semantic similarity. So in short, without getting really deep into the weeds, computers don't think in words, they think in numbers. So we basically take the entire sentence that contains the word embarrassed. We also take the entire sentence that contains the incorrect Spanish term, and we get a semantic similarity score that tells us how good of a translation is this Spanish relative to the source. And if it doesn't match a particular threshold, we would say it's incorrect. And you can actually see that pictorially here, where you have the correct translation that's much closer to embarrassed as opposed to pregnant, which has to do with body and pregnancy rather than emotion. So Here's actually what's happening behind the scenes of what I just described. We run both of these sentences, we get a number. If this number passes the threshold, then this passes. If it doesn't, then we have fallback mechanisms. The thing that's crucial here that I want to call out, I'm showing this example with translation. This happens in all of our LLM powered workflows, right? Anytime an LLM is involved for anything, be it translation, be it glossary term insertion, be it the LQA agent, right? Be it post editing, anytime an LLM is involved, this logic occurs, right? And this is very, very crucial to make sure that we catch hallucinations. So I'm going to turn it over to Olga now to talk a little bit about transparency and auditability.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I touched on it already briefly, but it's very important, and actually, it leads us to the next part of our conversation. What is transparency and auditability when you're working within a global content delivery or translation AI-first translation platform? Let's say something goes wrong. Let's say, and again, Alex was talking about hallucinations. Let's say there is a hallucination, and we don't necessarily know which part of the process this hallucination occurred in. Because as much as we have hallucination detection, let's allow for a split second that something managed to split through the cracks. This is where traceability and auditability come in. You can go back through the logs, you can go back through the process, and you can see exactly where things went wrong. And again, that's absolutely essential for the governance. You, on the client and on the user end, you have all the dashboards and reports, and you have a lot of tooling at your disposal where you can see the workflows, you can see the progress of your content, you can control your spend, you can actually see the translators were extremely transparent about who works on your jobs. So you have the full transparency across the platform. And this is where we talk about the governance at its finest. There is one other part of transparency and auditability, and that's something that's the theme that we've covered throughout this conference quite a bit. How do you know that your quality is what it should be? And how do you actually audit your quality without necessarily having a human in the loop? And let's have a look. There we are. So LQA agent in the product session, we already mentioned the LQA agent. That's the ultimate vehicle for AI governance when it comes to translation and language AI. Your LQA agent is your seal of approval or a red flag, let's hope it never happens, for what the quality of your translation actually is. And that's the optimal when you think about the governed platform. That's absolute optimal when it comes to how is my translation good? And Alex was talking about all the processes being multilingual. So when you work within a governed platform, that's something that you're very unlikely to be able to get from an individual LM. So there we go. High confidence quality evaluation. And Alex, back to you.
So I want to focus on logging as part of transparency and auditability. Olga mentioned this, right? And we're ISO certified for AI. And what's crucial for us is we log every single event that happens, right? Why is this important? What I'm showing you is a tool that we have that we actually can go into an LLM and begin to ask questions about what happened. So what you're seeing on the screen is actually a query that I sent to the tool to say, hey, looks like Microsoft was had a higher score than Google. That was chosen as the translation. Can you give me the score and can you explain to me why, right? And this explainability, this ability to figure out what's going on and remediate is very, very important. And what's nice is we can do this, number one, because we have all of these events logged and because we have the tools to use them. So this brings me to the last point, which is building block number 4, which is risk mitigation. So thus far, we've talked about things like clean data, quality checks, hallucination detection, audit trail. All of that reduces risk. That's really, really good. But I also want to talk about specifically safeguards to mitigate risk, right? Because I'm talking here about regulatory risk, about compliance risk, about risk to your brand safety. And if you're translating marketing content, legal disclosures, product claims, et cetera, anything that has regulated language, a single mistranslation can be very, very costly. So let me give you a couple of examples of this. So these are famous cases in China. So China has a Chinese advertising law in 2021, and the Chinese advertising law says that if you are selling into China, you may not use superlatives, absolutes, or highest level marketing terms, right? So you can't say stuff like the best, top tier, number one. And you are going to be fined if you do that, right? So there are famous cases with, you see some examples here with Budweiser, Estee Lauder, Blackmores, well-known companies that were claiming that their products, for example, Budweiser said, our products are made with all natural raw materials, right? Estee Lauder said, you have a youth index of plus 77. Unless you can really substantiate that, you're going to get fined, and these fines happens. Now, this actually goes beyond China. So in the UK, there is a UK Competitions and Market Authority Association, CMA, right? And you basically cannot use terms like eco, sustainable, responsible without a detailed explanation. You just can't say my clothes are organic or sustainable without explaining why. And if you don't do that, here's the catch. If you don't do that, they may impose fines of 10% of a company's global turnover, right? Just let that sink in for a second. 10% of an entire company's global turnover for breaches of consumer laws, right? And they can do this even without going through the courts. That's how important this is. So one of the things that we're working on is this 3-layer mitigation in our platform. One of the things we can do is with prompts, we can handle block lists or forbidden terms. We can make replacements. For example, use asterisks or use more innocuous, more innocent synonyms. We could also fine-tune large language models and make sure as much as possible that the LLM learns on good data so it doesn't produce forbidden data. We can also have glossary term insertion where we inject the correct term instead of the forbidden term. And then the last thing that we have is the ability to do dynamic routing. So we've actually began to roll this out for a couple of clients. We have the ability to actually say, okay, if we see a term that we think even is a little bit sketchy, is even a little bit questionable, we're not going to risk it, and we're going to dynamically route that to a human being. Right. So again, we're using LLMs that are fully traceable and that give us full explanation why a term was deemed to be forbidden versus not. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Olga to wrap up.
Just one quick comment, Alex. Don't you also want LLM to learn on the bad data to know what not to do?
Yes. Yes, and there are actually mechanisms. It's called DPO, direct preference optimization, where you could teach an LLM and say, this is really, really bad. Don't do this. Please don't do this. It's bad. This is what's really, really good. So do this. So there are ways that you could force an LLM, in addition to the other things that I described, to increase the probability that it'll do what you would like it to do.
Yeah, this is truly amazing how much actually can be done in the age of LLMs. Okay. And now let's look at the building blocks of AI governance, right? So we spoke at all of them. Let's look at the summary. So at the foundation of it is reliable data and robust quality checks. We'll know that LLMs or models are extremely data hungry. And again, Alex already spoke about it, data optimization, whether it's performance data or whether it's linguistic data. If you do not have that, then obviously you need to do something about it. And if it's performance data, work with internal stakeholders and make sure that the data that flows into your translation process is interoperable and can talk to each other. And let's say if it's about linguistic data, then again, that's something that Alex already touched on. So reliable data is absolute foundation and core. Then already spoke about detection and monitoring that goes hand in hand with transparency and auditability. When you can detect and when you can monitor your translation process performance, obviously that makes your process in equal parts transparent and auditable. And then great, you have all this knowledge, but but what you can actually do with the risks. And that, again, that's something that equally Alex and I touched on. Knowledge is, okay, well, yeah, I just learned that I'm using forbidden words for China. What do I do with that? If you don't have a solution and if you don't have your risk mitigation guardrails, then again, it's very hard, very difficult to succeed. So here we are, the building blocks of AI governance. And we always learn the AI governance, ethical AI, responsible AI, sustainable AI, all of these are relatively new fields. So this is what we know today. This is what we predict for the foreseeable future. But obviously, this field is consistently growing and evolving, and it's essential for us to learn from you. Okay? So again, the outcome of strong governance, I will repeat myself. I'll repeat what Alex said. What do you get with the right governance process? You get control, you get transparency, you get accountability, and you have successful, measured, well-planned governance first AI deployment. So there we are. Thank you very much. And we're opening the floor for questions.